My father sold my car to pay for my sister's trip, so I moved across the country and left them scrambling to contact me. I'm a 23-year-old guy who's always been the reliable one in my family, the one expected to adjust, compromise, and quietly give things up without making things difficult for everyone else. Growing up, I learned early that my feelings came second to my younger sister Haley's comfort, because she was the golden child and I was the one who was supposed to be strong. Every time I spoke up, my father would sigh and say things like, "Why do you always have to be so dramatic?" And somehow I started believing that wanting basic respect made me ungrateful. While Haley had everything handed to her, I worked part-time through college, juggling late shifts and early classes just to afford my first car, and when I finally bought it, it felt like more than metal and wheels. It was my proof that I could build something on my own, that I wasn't completely trapped in the role of family caretaker. I still remember the smell of the slightly worn leather, the hum of the engine when I turned the key, and the quiet relief that flooded my chest the first time I drove alone at night with the windows down, cold air brushing my face like freedom. My father never let me forget where loyalty was supposed to lie, though. "Family comes before comfort," he'd say, tapping his fingers against the kitchen table while staring at me like I was on trial. "You think life is fair? You think we all get what we want?" And I'd nod, swallowing every frustration because arguing only made things worse, only made me the villain in a story I never asked to be part of. Still, that car became my only escape, my safe space when the house felt too heavy, too tight, too full of unspoken resentment. I started to believe that earning my own independence was finally shifting how they saw me, that maybe I was carving out a version of myself they couldn't control anymore. But something about the way my father kept watching the keys on the counter made a quiet unease settle deep in my chest. It started with Haley bursting into the kitchen one evening, her voice bright and sharp like she'd just won something, saying, "Dad, you don't understand. This trip is a once-in-a-lifetime experience." While I sat there nursing cold coffee and trying not to look irritated. She went on about some last-minute luxury getaway with her friends, complete with beach photos already pulled up on her phone, and I watched my father lean forward like a devoted audience member instead of a parent who had 2 children to consider. "She deserves it," he murmured, eyes flicking toward me for half a second, like a silent warning not to ruin the moment. I felt that familiar tightening in my chest, the one that always showed up when I knew fairness wasn't part of the conversation. "And the money?" I asked carefully, keeping my voice steady, because every word felt like walking on glass. My father exhaled slowly and replied, "We'll figure it out. Family pulls together when it matters." The way he said it made my skin crawl, like I was being drafted into another invisible sacrifice without even signing up. Over the next few days, the atmosphere in the house shifted. Whispered conversations stopped the moment I walked into a room, and my father started mentioning things like, "We may need everyone to tighten their belts for a while avoiding direct eye contact." I noticed him hovering near my car more often, running his hand along the hood like he was testing something, like he owned the sense of pride I built from scratch. When I asked what was going on, he waved me off with, "You worry too much. It's not your problem." But it did feel like my problem. I'd find the car paperwork slightly moved, my spare key missing from its usual hook, and every time I called it out, Haley would roll her eyes and mutter, "God, you're so paranoid," under her breath. Even the air inside the house felt heavier, like something invisible was pressing down on me, something I couldn't name yet. And as I stood by my bedroom window that night, staring at my car under the dim streetlight, a strange dread crept into my bones, whispering that whatever they were planning didn't include my consent at all. The morning started like any other, except the air felt wrong the second I stepped outside, like something had been ripped away while I slept. I remember blinking under the pale sunlight, expecting to see my car parked in its usual spot, the same familiar outline that reassured me I still had one thing that belonged to me. Instead, there was nothing but an empty stretch of concrete and a faint tire mark fading into the road, as if my sense of stability had simply evaporated overnight. My stomach dropped so fast I thought I might throw up, and I walked closer, just to make sure my eyes weren't lying to me. "Where's my car?" I shouted into the house, my voice cracking in a way I didn't recognize. My father appeared at the doorway, arms crossed, oddly calm, like he'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Don't raise your voice," he said flatly, eyes cold. I sold it. I froze, the word echoing inside my skull like a gunshot. You what? My voice came out hoarse, barely holding together. Haley stepped behind him, already scrolling on her phone, a slight amused curve forming at the corner of her lips. We needed the money, he continued, shrugging like we were discussing a piece of broken furniture. And your sister's trip is important. You'll survive without a car. She deserves to make memories. I felt every nerve in my body go rigid, heat rushing to my face while my hands trembled at my sides. That was mine, I whispered, then louder. I paid for that. Every shift, every exhausted night, that was mine. He scoffed, shaking his head. Don't be selfish. You're acting like this house hasn't done anything for you. The walls suddenly felt closer, the air thicker, and Haley brushed past me, her shoulder grazing mine as she muttered, Relax, it's just a car. Like it wasn't my escape, my proof, my fragile sense of control. I stood there in silence, the weight of their indifference pressing down on my chest, feeling something inside me shift from shock to a slow-burning, dangerous resentment. And as my father turned his back on me without a trace of guilt, I realized this wasn't just a betrayal. It was a declaration of where I truly stood in this family. I didn't sleep that night, just lay there staring at the ceiling as the echo of his voice replayed over and over in my head. I sold it, like it was some casual decision he had every right to make. By morning, the grief had curdled into anger, sharp and restless, and I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore, not this time. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell of burnt toast and strong coffee hit me, and there they were, sitting like nothing had happened, my father reading the paper and Haley humming softly, already packing for her trip. We're not letting this slide, I said, my voice trembling but firm, the kind of tone that meant I was done swallowing my words. My father didn't even look up, just sighed, as if my pain was an inconvenience. You're overreacting again, he muttered. It's a car, not your soul. My soul is exactly what you keep selling. I snapped, and the words startled even me, raw and exposed. Haley scoffed, flipping her hair. You're so dramatic, honestly. You always make everything about you. I turned toward her, my heart pounding. It was about me. It was my car. Something I worked for. She smirked. And now it helped someone who actually knows how to enjoy life. That's when my father's face hardened, and he slammed his mug down, the dull thud echoing through the room. Watch how you speak, he warned, his eyes cold and unforgiving. You don't get to accuse me in my own house after everything I've done for you. The familiar guilt was meant to shrink me, but this time it only made my chest ache more. So stealing from me is doing something for me? I asked quietly. Is that what being a good father looks like? His jaw tightened. You are being disrespectful, he snapped. You're selfish, ungrateful, and blind to how much your sister needs support. The way he said it, like my hurt was an act of betrayal, twisted everything inside me. I could feel my pulse roaring in my ears, my hands curling into fists, my whole body vibrating with words I'd been holding back for years. As I stepped closer, ready to say everything I'd buried since childhood, I saw the familiar warning in his eyes. The look that meant he wasn't about to listen, but punish, and in that moment, I realized expressing my pain might cost me far more than a car. After that morning, everything changed, though nothing outwardly did. The house felt heavier, quieter, as if my very presence had become a disturbance. Haley carried on with her preparations for the trip, giggling with her friends on the phone, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. My father retreated to his study, slamming the door so hard I swore the walls shook. Every time I tried to speak, even casually, the words seemed to die on my tongue, smothered by their judgmental stares or dismissive glances. I started avoiding shared spaces, lingering only in my bedroom where the blinds were drawn and the carpet muffled the constant noise of a house that no longer felt like home. Even the kitchen, once warm with the smell of toast and coffee, now felt like a battlefield. I'd sit at the edge of my bed, listening to their laughter echo down the hallway, each giggle a reminder that my anger and disappointment meant nothing to them. My phone stayed off more often than not. I didn't want to hear Haley brag about her upcoming adventures, or my father's thinly veiled lectures about patience and sacrifice. The isolation felt suffocating, but it was also a strange kind of clarity. Alone, I could finally hear my own thoughts over the constant background of their demands. I started thinking about all the times I'd been pushed aside, told my dreams didn't matter, or that my feelings were exaggerated. And as I stared at the walls of my room, I could feel a simmering realization. I couldn't count on them to respect me, to see me as more than the obedient son. That night, as I lay on the edge of the bed, the hum of the street outside creeping through the cracked window, I felt something stir deep within me, a quiet, dangerous determination. They thought I would bend, that silence and patience would keep me tethered to their whims. But for the first time, I wondered what it would take to truly disappear from their control, and the thought made my chest pound with both fear and a strange sense of freedom. It wasn't until a week later that I stumbled onto the truth, and when I did, the betrayal cut deeper than the car ever could. I had been searching through old receipts on the kitchen counter, just trying to understand how my father could justify what he did, when I noticed a series of envelopes tucked behind the stack of bills, thick, worn, and labeled with names I didn't recognize. Curiosity mixed with dread, and I peeked inside one. My eyes widened as I realized my father had been secretly paying off a debt he had never mentioned, one so large it explained the sudden need for cash. My car hadn't been sold for my sister's happiness. It had been collateral for his own mistakes. Haley knew too. I overheard her whispering to a friend over the phone. Dad didn't have a choice, and I helped convince him. He wouldn't have done it otherwise. I felt my stomach churn, while rising at the realization that my father and sister had conspired behind my back, using me as a pawn in their secret financial maneuvering. Everything I thought I understood about loyalty, about fairness in our family, had been a lie. The golden child image, the smiles, the dismissive reassurances, all a facade. I sat there, staring at the envelopes, feeling the walls close in. The room smelled faintly of old paper and the lingering scent of burnt toast from breakfast hours ago, and yet nothing seemed normal anymore. The betrayal wasn't just about a car or a trip. It was the way they had used my trust, my patience, my belief in them, as leverage. For the first time, anger and clarity mingled into something dangerous. I realized that if I stayed, I would only continue to be manipulated, my life dictated by their whims. Something had to change, and it had to happen soon, before the next calculated move robbed me of even more. And as I locked eyes with the envelopes, a plan started forming in the back of my mind, a way to reclaim control that they would never see coming. After discovering the truth about my father and Haley, I couldn't stay in that house another day without feeling like I was suffocating. The air felt heavier, almost tangible with betrayal, and every glance from my father or smirk from Haley made my skin crawl. I realized that no amount of reasoning, pleading, or patience would ever earn their respect or consideration. I had to get out, completely and permanently. I started small, hiding a notebook in my closet and jotting down budgets, apartment listings, and job applications in cities far from home. Each page was like a lifeline, a tangible piece of freedom that existed outside their control. I counted every penny, planned every shift at work to maximize savings, and researched neighborhoods that felt safe and quiet. The thrill of the plan mixed with anxiety, a constant hum in my chest that made my heart pound in a way I hadn't felt since I first held the keys to my car. At night, I'd walk past my father's study, pretending to sleep, while my thoughts raced with every what if and how could I scenario. I imagined packing my things silently, leaving only a note or maybe nothing at all. I pictured the look on Haley's face when she realized she couldn't manipulate me anymore, when her golden child status held no power over me. Every small action, saving money, sending applications, scouting apartments online, felt like reclaiming a piece of my life that had been quietly stolen for years. And yet, a knot of fear remained in my stomach. If I left, there would be no turning back. Their attempts to guilt, to manipulate, or to pull me back would be futile, and that thought made both terror and exhilaration swirl together inside me. By the end of that week, I had a rough plan, a city far enough to disappear, a job lined up, and a few bags packed with essentials. I lay awake that night listening to the hum of the street outside, feeling the weight of my decision settle in, knowing that the first step toward freedom would also be the first step into uncertainty, but the only step I could take to survive. It happened the day I finally thought I had a window to leave. I overheard my father talking to Haley in the kitchen, their voices low but sharp enough to slice through the walls of my room. "He'll never go anywhere," Haley said, a smirk in her tone I could almost hear even from behind the closed door. My father chuckled softly, and I felt a cold, sinking dread. "He's too dependent on us, too soft," he said. "He'll come around eventually." The words hit harder than any physical blow. Every ounce of hope I'd been holding onto wavered in that moment. I sank to the floor of my bedroom, back against the wall, feeling the weight of years of manipulation pressed down like a physical force. The betrayal, the humiliation, and the suffocating sense of being trapped coiled in my chest, making it hard to breathe. I realized just how small I had been made to feel, how my autonomy had been stripped away piece by piece, disguised as care or family duty. I ran my hands through my hair, feeling the knot of fear and frustration tighten even more, and for the first time, I wondered if I'd ever escape this house with my dignity intact. Haley's laughter from the other room, mingled with my father's casual agreement, made my stomach churn. Every day I had tolerated this, believed in their reasoning, and swallowed my anger, and now it seemed like all my plans, all my careful saving and plotting, could be undermined before they even began. The helplessness was suffocating. I felt cornered, like a trapped animal, and for a moment, I considered giving up entirely, resigning myself to the role I'd been cast in for my entire life. But as the initial wave of despair passed, a flicker of determination ignited. If I stayed, I would be broken, crushed under the weight of their control. I pressed my palms to the floor, closed my eyes, and made a decision that would change everything. I wouldn't let them win. Not this time. The question that lingered in my mind as I lay there, tense and trembling, was simple. How far was I willing to go to finally disappear from their grasp? I left before the sun had fully risen, when the house was still wrapped in that eerie, shallow silence that feels almost sacred. The air outside was cold enough to sting my cheeks, and as I stepped onto the driveway, I caught myself looking at the empty spot where my car used to sit, the ghost of my stolen freedom. My bags were packed light, just the things that mattered, and every zipper that slid shut sounded impossibly loud in the still morning. I hesitated for one fleeting second at the front door, my hand resting on the worn handle, wondering if anyone would even notice how carefully I'd learned to disappear. Inside, the faint smell of last night's dinner clung to the air, and the hallway creaked softly as I walked past my father's room, past Haley's, past every space that had slowly chipped away at who I was. I didn't wake them. I didn't leave a note. My silence felt louder than any argument I'd ever had with them. As I stepped outside and gently closed the door behind me, it felt like sealing off a life that only ever knew how to hurt me. The bus engine rumbled low and steady in the distance, and when I climbed aboard, the vinyl seat was cold against my palms. I watched the familiar streets blur past the window, the cracked sidewalks, the old streetlights, the corners that once felt like home shrinking until they were nothing but memories brushing against glass. My phone vibrated in my pocket, but I didn't look at it. I didn't want to see their names, their missed calls, their belated concern. I needed to breathe without their voices controlling the air. For the first time in years, there was no one telling me what I owed them, no accusations waiting around the corner, no Haley rolling her eyes at my existence. Just the quiet hum of the road and the shaky rhythm of my own heartbeat. And yet, beneath that fragile relief, a sharp thread of fear twisted through me, because I knew the moment they realized I was truly gone, their panic would turn loud, desperate, and unpredictable, and I had no idea how far they would go to pull me back. Within hours, my phone began blowing up. The first few messages were from my father. "Come home. Let's talk. You're overreacting." I didn't answer. Then Haley's texts started, each one more insistent than the last. "You can't just disappear. It's family. We need you." I scrolled through them, my stomach twisting, and felt a strange mix of guilt and power. For the first time, they couldn't control me, not with their words, not with their sighs, not with their accusations. Relatives started calling too, my aunt, my uncle, even my grandmother, all trying to mediate, all acting like they were shocked at my drastic behavior. "We just want to make sure you're safe," one cousin said, but the tone was dripping with judgment, as if the decision to leave had somehow been morally wrong. I sat on my tiny apartment couch, the dim morning light spilling across my bare walls, and let the phone vibrate on silent. Each buzz was a reminder of the power shift. They had no leverage anymore. I didn't owe them explanations, apologies, or reassurances. And yet, the panic in their messages was almost intoxicating. Haley's last one read, "If you really go through with this, don't expect anything from us again." My father's was worse. "Think carefully. You're making a huge mistake. This isn't who you are." I closed my eyes, feeling the hum of the street outside seep through the window, letting it remind me that the world existed beyond their narrow expectations. I could breathe here. I could eat my breakfast without being told I was ungrateful. I could plan my next steps without anyone's permission. Even so, a small, prickling unease lingered. I knew this wasn't just panic. It was the beginning of them trying every trick, every manipulation they had learned over years to pull me back. And as I pressed my palms to my knees, staring out at the first hints of city traffic outside my window, I realized the real test wasn't leaving. It was staying gone, keeping the freedom I had finally seized. I finally answered my father's call 2 weeks later, but only when I was ready, calm, centered, and untethered by the fear that had gripped me for so long. His voice came through the line, strained and sharp. "You need to come back. This isn't who you are. Think about your family." I let him speak for a few moments, hearing the desperation that had always lurked beneath his commanding tone, and then I cut in, steady and unwavering. "You've made your choices. I've made mine. I'm done being a pawn in this house." Haley's voice joined in, trembling, almost theatrical. "You're destroying everything. We're your family." I could almost picture her smirk disappearing for a moment, replaced by shock. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "You're the ones who destroyed it. I didn't do this, you did. Every decision, every betrayal, every time you made me feel invisible. That's what broke this family, not me leaving." My words hung in the air, heavy, unyielding. My father sputtered, trying to regain control, but I didn't let him. I recounted the car, the hidden debts, the whispered conspiracies, Haley's complicit smirk, everything he and she thought they had hidden, every manipulation laid bare. I could hear his frustration, the tightness in his throat, as if for once he couldn't bend the narrative to suit him. For the first time, the power dynamic had flipped entirely, and it was dizzying. He begged, pleaded, and tried guilt. She cried, tried manipulation, but none of it reached me anymore. I stayed firm, letting silence punctuate every lie and excuse they offered. And when I finally hung up, a strange, electric calm washed over me, the weight of years of anger, resentment, and frustration finally lifting. As I set the phone down and looked out my apartment window, I realized this confrontation wasn't about winning an argument. It wasn't about them understanding me. It was about me finally claiming my space, my voice, my life. And for the first time, I felt fully untouchable, entirely my own. Yet part of me knew they would never truly forget. The first morning in my new city, I woke up to sunlight spilling across my small apartment, a quiet warmth that felt alien after years of tension and manipulation. I brewed coffee, listening to the distant hum of traffic, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't rushing to meet anyone else's expectations. My furniture was sparse, my walls bare, but every corner of this place was mine, unclaimed, untouched, and free from judgment. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the aroma ground me, and felt a sense of peace I hadn't known existed. For the first few weeks, I avoided checking my phone. Messages, missed calls, and even angry texts from my father and Haley piled up, but I let them remain unseen. The world outside my apartment, with its raw, imperfect chaos, felt safer than the home I had left. I walked through parks, explored quiet streets, and found small cafes where the barista didn't know my family or their rules. With each passing day, the tension in my chest loosened, replaced by the subtle, steady pulse of autonomy. I started to rebuild myself, not as the son, not as the obedient brother, but as a person who deserved respect and freedom. I took up a small job, enough to pay rent and save a little, and for the first time, I was proud of every single cent I earned. Earned for me, not for someone else's sense of control. The memories of betrayal still lingered, raw and jagged, but instead of crushing me, they reminded me why I'd left. Months passed, and I realized the most profound revenge wasn't confrontation or punishment. It was living a life they could never touch, a life they couldn't manipulate. My phone rang less urgently now, and I didn't answer. Silence became my loudest statement. And as I looked out over the city skyline one evening, feeling the cool breeze against my face, I understood. I had finally built something untouchable, a life of my own making, and no one could take that from me.